In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, Caught in a Lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 108 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. How about you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
I am upbeat. I am ready to put out an amazing episode.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to do.
We're going to do it. So how was your week?
It was good.
Yeah?
It was slow.
Slow.
Work-wise.
Work-wise, yeah.
Did clean out my office.
Yeah.
Which you helped me do.
I did.
And I think that's, even though I'm working for maybe a couple more weeks, a week and a half.
Some reason I carried out the big box and you...
I got a torn labrum, man. So you had to do the heavy lifting.
I did.
But I think that's the last time I'll be in the office. And it was a weird feeling.
Well, I hope so, because somebody's already moved into your office.
Yeah, I know. They didn't wait very long.
No.
They moved somebody else.
Yeah, it is when you move out. Then all of a sudden, all the people start coming in to see what's left in your office that they might want to take.
They're cherry picking
the
stuff.
Yeah, and then the new person moves in. They're like, hey, why is there only one monitor? Why is there only, why do I have the old heavy monitors?
Right.
I thought he had
Somebody
those really...
took the nice big white screens. And all right, Gibbs, we have got some new Patreon shout outs.
Okay.
We had Camilla Pagan.
Hey, Camilla.
Kayla Kennedy. Richard Bungay.
Hey, Bungay.
Sari Torres.
Sari?
Sari.
It's like your phone? Like Sari?
No, that's Siri.
Or Sari.
Domisco del Barbarez.
Ooh, Domisco del Barbarez.
That was not in any way correct, but I liked it. I liked your version very much.
Is it good?
Yeah.
All right.
He came out at our highest level.
Thank you very much.
Aaron Weatherford.
Hey, Aaron.
Andy Kajulin.
Ooh, Kajulin.
Melissa Mack.
You know Kajulin, man. Is that like that stuff in Jell-O?
That's collagen.
It's close enough.
It's not close. Jody Missy.
Jody and Missy.
Jody and Missy both.
They're a tag team.
Nakia White.
Hey, Nakia.
Julia Krimzer.
That's like the Russian.
That's Kremlin.
Because of Russian.
Kara Evans, our buddy that we met at CrimeCon.
Flying the friendly skies.
Who just got married.
Oh, yep, that's right. Congratulations.
Congratulations. She's been a Patreon supporter for a long time.
Since CrimeCon.
She went nuts and just went out of the stratosphere.
She said, man, I've been logging a lot of flights lately.
Yeah, she
making some good dollar.
She must be getting some overtime, or I don't know how it works when you're flying.
Maybe she said, I got this wedding money.
Whatever it is, she felt compelled to support us even more, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Victoria Nesseth.
Hey, thank you, Victoria.
Brett Del Simone.
Hey, Brett Del Simone.
Crystal Childs.
Crystal.
Jeanette A. Strand.
Better than being B-stranded.
And Ashley Hermes.
Ashley Hermes.
So awesome support.
Yeah, that's good.
From new Patreon members.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, we do appreciate that. And if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Magda Anna.
Magda.
Been with us a long time, so we appreciate the new support. We appreciate the continued support from everyone.
Thank you.
And we had some great PayPal support.
Ooh, I like PayPal.
As well. Kipper Westbrook.
Hey, Kipper.
Sizable donation. Grace Brunei.
Ooh, Brunei?
Jillian Pakran.
Well, wait a minute. Pakran?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yep. Linda Wynn,
Hey, Linda, when is it happening?
Eric Mead,
Hey, Eric.
and Jamie Hester.
Oh, hey, Jamie Hester, thank you.
So a lot of PayPal support, and we really appreciate that as
do.
well. All right, Gibbs, we just finished up recording a brand new Patreon episode
Patreon only.
on Charlie Brandt.
It was good.
It was good. I mean, this is a guy that murdered at the age of 13,
Yeah,
tried to murder essentially his whole family,
I know.
murdered part of it,
He did.
and then 30 some years later murders his new family.
Yeah.
Essentially. But that's not the story. I mean, that is the story, but that's not all of the story.
Well, you got the gap,
Yeah, 33 years, basically.
right?
What happened during those 33 years? And it comes down to the fact that investigators feel this guy could be a full-blown serial killer
Yeah.
with a body count as high as we've seen 26, could be even higher.
Could be.
Because he had a job that allowed him to travel and, but,
So if you're Patreon, go listen to it.
go listen
If you're
to
not
it.
Patreon,
it's a good reason to
join up.
to start.
A couple bucks a month and get you a couple podcasts.
All right. So there is no Unsolved episode this week. We're taking a break from Unsolved, but I will say, go ahead and make an announcement, Gibbs. We have some more Unsolved episodes planned the rest of this year.
Sure.
But starting in 2019, in January, we are essentially 52 episodes a year.
On
Both.
both.
TCAT and Unsolved.
Yeah. So you won't have the gap coming up in the future.
There will be no more gaps.
Yeah.
There will be 52 episodes of Unsolved next year.
And we will still continue to do our Patreon only episodes.
Yep, we made that decision.
We are just going to get busier.
Because I am going to have a little bit more time, which we've talked about. Are you ready to get into this episode?
I am. Let's do it.
So we're talking about Patrick Purdy. And you and I have been going back and forth for a while now. We have been wanting to cover a school shooting. Touchy subject. There's a lot of them out there, unfortunately. And this is the one that we picked first. We're going back to the 80s. And this is a name that a lot of people may not have heard of. Everybody's familiar with Columbine and,
Right.
Newtown and a lot of the ones that are more recent. There are not many events, Gibbs, I believe this, that tear this country up as some of these school shootings have over the years. And unfortunately, there are a lot to cover, and we will cover them. But the one we're talking about today, unlike the ones that I just mentioned, it was not committed by a fellow student who currently went to the school where the shooting occurred. This one was committed by an adult, and it was motivated by what authorities would later claim to be, to a large degree, racial hatred. So a different motivation, right, than some of the newer, and I say newer, but some of the more recent school shootings. A lot of those are around being bullied or, other factors. The one we're talking about right now has a lot to do with race. It has a lot to do with ethnicity, and it has to do with a man who saw a certain ethnicity as preventing him from getting where he wanted in life. That's the story we're about ready to tell. And it happened on January 17th, 1989 at the Cleveland Elementary School in Stockton, California. Patrick Purdy shot and killed 5 school children and wounded over 30 other kids and a teacher before turning the gun on himself. This event became known as the Cleveland School Massacre. I've seen it listed as the Stockton Massacre, the Stockton Schoolyard Shooting. You'll see it listed by a number of names. But getting back to, the tragedy of how many school shootings there have been, I think a lot of us, myself included, tend to think of these school shootings as more of a recent thing, right? You think back to Columbine, late 90s, 1999. And I think a lot of us think about Columbine setting the stage is kind of one of the first, right? Setting the stage for a bunch of these school shootings to happen
Sure.
later. And there's no doubt it has gotten worse over time, but there have been school shootings for a long time. The shooting at the Cleveland school in Stockton in 1989 was the most deadly of the 1980s. But Gibbs, when you get into the research and you saw it, you see that even in the 1980s, there were a large number of these school shootings.
Yeah, you just didn't hear about them like you do today.
No.
Right? You didn't have social media. You didn't have 200 channel TV with, 80 of them being news channel, right? I mean, back in the day, it was probably picked up more on the local regional, didn't really hit national a lot. If it did, it was not a big story.
Yeah, I just don't remember as a kid being in school, worrying about somebody coming in and, starting to shoot up the school.
Yeah, for me, of course I was graduated by then, but I don't think it was really something you thought about until Columbine.
Yeah.
That's when you thought,
wow.
Yeah.
Because it received so much coverage.
It did.
But I know my kids do today. They really, that is something that is on their mind. We talk about it. Every time one of these pops up on the news, over the years, I've gotten that question. Man, is that going to happen? Do I need to worry about that? And what do you tell kids?
Yeah, you're right. And then, then your wife works in a school too.
Sure,
so,
my wife's a teacher.
She's very aware of it as well.
The one thing I will say that I do tell them is be nice to people. Do not, now bullying, there's a lot of anti-bullying campaigns these days. Not to say that it doesn't go on, but I tell them, I said, just be nice to everyone because you don't know
That's true.
what's going to happen. You don't want to make an enemy.
Yeah, there's no reason to bully somebody. There's just not. There's no reason to do certain things. So just be cordial, be nice. If you don't have anything nice to say, why even say it to somebody?
All right, let's get into the background of Patrick Edward Purdy. He was born November 10th, 1964 in Washington State to Patrick and Kathleen Purdy. So his dad was in the U.S. Army at the time that Patrick was born and would later be honorably discharged after spending time in the hospital for psychiatric evaluations. I think this is an important issue, Gibbs, because later on, the mental stability of his son, Patrick, will be questioned as well. And, you look at the marriage of his parents, it was not a good one. It ended when Patrick was just a couple of years old. He was a little baby. There are reports that his father threatened to kill his mother with the family pistol, and she filed for a divorce, eventually taking Patrick to live in Stockton, California. That's not a good way to stay married. Threatening your significant other with a gun. Not a good recipe for long-term, happy married life. His mother remarried to a man named Albert in 1969 who became Patrick's stepfather. Again, this wouldn't be a long marriage either. It lasted about 4 years, but it's during this marriage that Patrick attended Cleveland Elementary School in Stockton. So the same school that he's later, as an adult, going to go on a shooting spree, he was there from kindergarten to about third grade. So you look at Patrick, by the age of 9, 10 years old, his father's out of his life, has been for many years, Gibbs. His stepfather is now gone, and he's alone living with his mother. They've moved to Sacramento. And the reports on his mother are not good. There's allegations that she was physically abusive, she was neglectful. It's been said that she liked to party more than she liked to be a parent. To that point, protective services were called twice in December 1973 alone on allegations that she was abusive to Patrick and his two siblings. So we know this attack is going to occur in 1989.
Right.
After it happens, as happens in all these types of situations, they're going to go back, right? They're going to talk to people that knew the Purdys back in the day. People would say of Kathleen back during that time frame. That she didn't supervise her children. She essentially left them up to their own devices. She would often lock them out of the house. The Purdy kids in the wintertime walked around with no coats on. This is what people said about this family. Obviously, she was not a good mother.
Not a good mom at all, doesn't sound like.
No,
really.
in no way, shape, or form. But what apparently was a number of visits by Child Protective Services didn't amount to much, because Patrick and the other children continued living with their mother. It wouldn't be until Patrick was 13 years old that he hit his own mother in the face, that she kicked him out. And at the age of 13, he was homeless for a time, living on the streets. And then he was in and out of foster care. But eventually he ended up with his father in Lodi, California. But his criminal record had essentially already started by this point. At the age of 12, he had his first brush with the law, some type of BB gun shooting incident. But he wasn't arrested then. His first arrest would come after he started living with his father, and he was attending Lodi High School. And Gibbs, if the care provided by his mother sounded less than optimal, which I believe it did, you would agree with that.
I would agree with that.
I'm not sure that the parental care provided by his father was that much better. Now, he was a teenager, right? He's a 15-year-old kid. You and I both know how hard teenagers can be to control.
Oh, yeah. Just some tough times.
At a certain point, I was this way for sure. I'm assuming you were too. As a teenager, you just start thinking that you know everything and you just want to start doing your own thing, right? Even if that leads you, that own thing leads you down the wrong path.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell your kids from experience, this is what's going to happen. Some reason they don't believe it, and they've got to just go out and find out on their own, and then they come back and they're like, hey, you were right. I'm like, I know I was right.
Yeah, sometimes they just have to experience things for themselves, and I did that too, right? I can remember back my dad saying, that's not a good idea. I wouldn't do that.
Right.
But you know what?
You did it.
Hell, I did it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, we do things.
And you also know what? It turned out not to be a good idea.
Yeah.
So the old man was right every now and then, more often than not. But I don't think I realized it until I was older, out of those teenage years, right? I thought I was so smart.
Well, sometimes we don't have the logic we think we should have, or logic that we need to have. That comes from experience. That comes from been there, done that.
So Patrick's in high school sometimes. I don't think he attended all that much. From the research, he was drinking heavily. I think this kid was an alcoholic, Gibbs, by the age of 15. He was into drugs. So again, that's why I said I don't know if his dad was a good parent or if this was just a teenager that was going to do whatever the heck he wanted to anyway. I don't know the answer to that. His first arrest that I mentioned came at the age of 15, and it wasn't just one. He was arrested a number of times at that age. He was arrested for underage drinking. He even got arrested for solicitation of prostitution.
Really?
At 15.
At 15? That's hitting it young.
I don't know where he got the money.
He found it.
Maybe.
What time? What was your age when you started hitting the sex worker, local sex workers?
It must have been 9, 10.
9, 10?
Yeah, I don't remember. But something bad happened in 1981. Purdy's father, who was also named Patrick, we said that, he died in a car crash. And I think it had a big effect on Patrick, as it would to any kid.
Yeah.
Your father dying at a young age when you're young as well. Now, his stepmother, because his father remarried, would later be interviewed.
I think something happened at that school or in that area, and he went back. He couldn't handle it any longer. He had kept it inside and hadn't talked to anyone. I honestly believe it. And I don't know what makes my conviction that. But there was a reason he got into alcohol and or drugs. And it could have stemmed back to when he was going to that school.
So obviously, Gibbs, this is after the shooting, but I thought it was probably the best place to play the clip because she's talking about him being into alcohol and drugs. She's also foreshadowing a little bit about what she believes may have been the cause of the shooting. We're going to get into that much more later on. But as far as Patrick is concerned, he started piling up arrests. Drug possession, illegal weapons, possession of stolen property. As a teenager.
That's not good.
It's not good.
Not good at all.
But what happened is, and this happens in a lot of cases we talk about, all of these charges were either dropped due to lack of evidence or they were reduced down to, let's say, misdemeanors. Now, that's going to be a big deal later on when we talk about buying a gun. He even had an arrest for armed robbery in 1984. That's a serious offense.
That's huge. It's, getting into felonies.
But the charges, again, were reduced, and he only served 30 days in jail.
He's lucky.
For some type of, well, obviously it wasn't armed robbery by the time they reduced the charges. You're not going to do 30 days for armed robbery.
No.
Then you'd get into early 1987. He was arrested again, this time with his half-brother. They were shooting guns in a national forest near Lake Tahoe. So it's one thing to point out, Patrick Purdy had an obsession with guns from, I believe, a pretty early age. When he was arrested, apparently he had a book on him that was some type of white power, Aryan Nation book, and he didn't go quietly. He resisted arrest. In the sheriff's deputy's report, it was said that Patrick Purdy told him it was his duty to help the suppressed and to overthrow the suppressors.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what okay.
Yeah, so he's still pretty young, right? At this point. He's in his early 20s, but he's getting into some strange ideations. Let's put it that way. During this resisting arrest, apparently, he kicked some of the deputies, and when they finally got him in the back of the squad car, he kicked out one of the back windows.
Not good.
No, so he's in jail. He tried to take his own life twice, unsuccessfully. Once by hanging himself with ripped up strips of his shirt. That didn't work.
No.
And then the second time, he tried to cut his wrists with his fingernails and toenails, which I think would be very hard to do.
She got a really long, big toenail. Maybe
it's all
file
like
it
scraggly.
Down. Yeah.
It got cut somehow. It's all jagged.
Maybe you could get it. I don't know. I think it'd be tough, though.
It didn't work. Like I said, he was unsuccessful. But I think the key thing here, Gibbs, is that his mental health was evaluated during this period. And in the reports that came out, he was described as dangerous to both himself and to others. And it was noted that he suffered from some, mental difficulties, mental disabilities, whatever you want to call them. Actually, in the report itself, I think they use the R word. Now, obviously, that's a word that is not used.
No.
But I think everybody knows what I'm saying. Back then, they used that word about Patrick Purdy.
They would.
So he pleaded guilty to his charges. And he spent about 45 days in the county jail. So again, he's not doing long stretches of time.
Did you ever do county?
I've never done any jail.
No time at all?
No. Mm-mm. I've been married for
there you go.
20-some years.
There you go. Huh?
But I've never done actual jail time.
Yeah.
And my wife's going to hear that, and she's going to be like...
You think you're in jail, huh? All right.
Oh, you think it was bad now?
Yeah, let me show you what it's going to be like.
Wait till after you said that, now it's really going to be bad.
Yeah.
All right, Gibbs, let's take a quick break to talk about our sponsors. And the first one is Buffy. You may have heard me talk about this before, but Buffy makes the best comforter I've ever used. Buffy makes comforters that are better for you and the earth. This comforter has over 11,000 reviews. Customers agree it's the softest, fluffiest comforter they've ever tried. And I back that up. The outside shell is 100% eucalyptus fiber. It's a unique material that's softer than cotton and naturally soothes skin. And it's hypoallergenic. Buffy's mission is to make the best soft goods using sustainable materials and innovative design without animal cruelty or harmful waste. And they believe bedding is personal. So Buffy offers a complimentary trial. Try a comforter in your own home for 30 days. If you don't love it, return it free. So our listeners can get $20 off your Buffy comforter by visiting buffy.co and using our promo code TCAT. Again, to get $20 off your Buffy comforter, visit buffy.co, there's no M on there, .co, and enter promo code TCAT. And next, let's talk about Candid. If you're someone out there that has a problem with your teeth that you've always wanted to get fixed, this is a great option. You don't have to go through the hassle or long-term treatment of wire braces, and you can do it from the comfort of your own home. You'll get straighter and brighter teeth in an average of 6 months, and it costs 65% less than braces. No office visits, and Candid is a company that only uses orthodontists. So these clear aligners are sent directly to your home, and they're customized specifically for you to straighten your teeth. So the first step is to purchase Candid's modeling kit, which is sent directly to your home, and you can take impressions of your teeth. You send this back with a few photos, and Candid's network of orthodontists reviews your specific case, and they provide you with a 3D preview of what your treatment will look like. And then from there, it's up to you whether you want to move forward with your clear aligner treatment plan. So you're just one step away from getting straighter, whiter teeth when you use our dedicated link, candidco.com/TCAT. You'll save 25% on your modeling kit. That's candidco.com/TCAT to get 25% off the price of your modeling kit. candidco.com/TCAT. So over the years, he bounced around from job to job. He never had anything stick, right? Whether it was construction, laborers' jobs. He worked as a security guard. Apparently in his security guard gig, there was an incident where somebody was being beaten in front of him and he failed to step in. He just sat there and watched somebody get beaten. And they said, you know what? I don't think you're cut out to be a security guard here. You're not keeping things very secure.
You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing?
Right. So he left that job in the fall of '87. So we're getting close. We're just a couple of years away from this mass shooting. Purdy began taking classes to be a welder at a local college. But again, he left after just a few months. He started drifting around the country, looking for work, doing odd jobs. I think the key thing is here, he wasn't very good at sticking with anything. And this is going to come up later.
Not a finisher.
No, he would start things. He couldn't stick with things. And then he would blame other people. And again, I don't want to get too much into it right now. It's going to play a big part in this story. So in early 1988, he's back in Stockton, California, working at a job, but just a little bit later that year, he's up in Oregon, living with his aunt in a town called Sandy, which at the time was a logging and farming community of about 4,000 people, pretty close to Portland, Sandy, Oregon. And it was on August 3rd that Patrick Purdy walked into the Sandy Trading Post and he bought a Chinese-made AK-47 for $349.95.
Wow. It's cheap.
Yeah, pretty cheap. AKs back then were pretty cheap. I read that you could pretty much get one anywhere for somewhere in the 300s.
Wow. Okay.
AKs, most popular gun in the world.
Yeah, in the world.
In the world, by far. There's more AK-47s out there than, I believe, any other type of gun. Because you think of an AK being from Russia, every communist country has adopted the AK.
Right.
Over the years. And then because they were so cheap, you could get them so cheap, all these other countries started buying up AKs. You look at like Somali pirates use AKs. I mean, everybody, especially in like third world countries.
The most populated country in the world, what, China's? AKs?
Sure.
So.
Yeah, it's a communist country. But you see them in the Middle East. You see them everywhere.
There's automatic or semi-automatic?
Both. They make them both.
But what
So,
was this one? Would have been
What Patrick Purdy bought was a semi-automatic AK-47.
Yeah.
Meaning, and you and I have talked about this before, but just to clarify, semi-automatic meaning you have to pull the trigger. Every time you pull the trigger, you're going to fire a round.
Right.
Versus automatic where you just keep your finger held down on the trigger.
Right.
In a military type AK, there would be a selector switch where you could go from semi-automatic to fully automatic.
Right.
Like if you were in the military, or what probably like a Somali pirate would try to buy would be one of those.
Yeah. I kind of like the semi-automatic because you have control.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to a lot of people that have been in the military that have shot, M16s and guns like that, sometimes they're very hard to control when they're on automatic mode. It just has a tendency to walk itself up because of the recoil. It's hard to keep it on like on a plane. But it is important. And I'm glad you asked the question. It's important to note that this is a semi-automatic AK-47, essentially no different than a hunting rifle. The difference being, and this is where later on we're going to get into the gun debate a little bit, the difference being with an AK-47, you can buy a very high capacity clip.
Yes.
That holds a lot of rounds.
Right.
And Patrick Purdy is going to do that. So he's bought this AK-47 on December 26th. This is less than a month before the shooting. He's back in Stockton, and he got a room at the El Rancho Motel. Not to be confused with the Mexican restaurant that we go to.
El Rancho Grande.
El Rancho Grande.
Yeah.
Just a couple of days later, December 28th, Patrick Purdy walked into the Hunter Lone Pawn Shop in Stockton, and he bought a Taurus 9mm pistol. And apparently the guy had a lot of guns. Over the years, he had purchased a lot of handguns. But back then, in the 1980s, there was a 15-day waiting period on handguns.
Okay.
And I can't remember if that was nationwide. I think it might have been.
Okay, you weren't sure.
I'm not
could have been
positive.
California.
It could have been California, but for some reason, I thought there was a national 15-day waiting period at one point. Obviously, that's not the case today.
No.
You can walk right in.
Walk out.
And walk out. But back then, there was a 15-day waiting period, and he did that. Bought it on the 28th. 15 days later, he goes back to the pawn shop to pick up this 9mm handgun. This is 4 days before the shooting. And we have to talk about Stockton, California a little bit, and specifically its makeup back in 1989. So one article said that Stockton had about 172,000 residents back then, and that a sixth of those 172,000 residents were immigrants from Southeast Asia. That's a pretty high percentage.
That's a really high.
And it's an important fact because it's going to come out that Patrick Purdy had a deep-seated hatred for immigrants in general, but especially for immigrants that came from Southeast Asia.
It's not just Asian, but Southeast
Very
Asians.
specific. We're talking about like Vietnamese, Cambodian, that type of, that region.
That's a strange thing to have a hatred. I mean, to hate any race is bizarre to me, but to isolate not Asian, but Southeast Asians.
And it's why I'm putting out these numbers, right? A sixth of the population of Stockton, California had immigrated from Southeast Asia. So he was in contact with a lot of immigrants from that region of the world. It's going to be huge. It's going to play a big part. Now, to piggyback off that, the makeup of the students at the Cleveland Elementary School where this shooting is going to happen, it was said that, at the time is about 70% Asian. I don't know if that was specifically Southeast Asian, but all of this is leading us up to the events of the shooting, right? Purdy was 24 years old when this happened. although police would have a very difficult time at first determining his correct age. Apparently, his driver's license said he was 26. Other public records listed him at all types of different ages, 24, 25, 27. And what's so strange about this is you can go back now and look at newspaper articles from 1989, and you will see him listed as 5, 6 different ages.
So they got just that whole 5 years difference.
Well, I think a lot of newspapers went with 26 at first,
right?
Because that's what his driver's license said. It's probably the information that they had first, but it would later come out that he was actually 24 years old.
Well, you had him saying 25, 27, 26, 24, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, they were in the ballpark, but it wasn't just ages. He also used a number of aliases over the years. His name was Patrick Purdy, but a lot of times he used the last name West.
Wait, what? You mean using my last name, Rex West?
Yeah, I don't think he ever used Rex, but
Rex West.
I saw that he listed himself as Patrick West, Eddie West. He just didn't like to, I guess, say who he really was, how old he really was. In fact, like I said, even some of the early articles that came out, this wasn't the Podunk Times. This was like the New York Times or some of the big papers in San Francisco and LA. After the shooting, they actually said his name was West.
Really?
And they listed Patrick Purdy as an alias, even though that was his real name. So at the time of the shooting, Patrick Purdy was 5'10", 150 pounds soaking wet, and had dirty blonde hair. And it was that Tuesday, January 17th, 1989, Patrick Purdy parked his 1977 station wagon on a street near the Cleveland Elementary School just before noon. Inside this car, Gibbs, he had packed it with fireworks, a pipe bomb, and a bunch of containers that had flammable liquid. It's a recipe for a big boom.
Huge boom.
But that was his design. And I've seen a couple of different varying accounts of how he started this fire, which resulted in this big boom. One account, he used a Budweiser beer bottle filled with gasoline to make like a Molotov cocktail.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Lit that on fire and threw it into the car. Either way, he did start a fire in the car. And I think the thought after the fact is, okay, this is a diversion, right? This was designed to be a diversion for police, maybe. That's what the thinking by investigators was after the fact. But we have to talk about what Patrick was wearing, what he was carrying. So he's wearing a flak jacket, but it's not just that. It's what he had written on this jacket. So he had on it the words freedom, Libya, PLO, Earthman, which I don't even know what that means.
I don't either.
And death to the great Satan, which he misspelled and it looked like satin.
Someone's like, what's up? This guy hated satin.
It's the great satin, whatever that is.
Yeah, he really didn't like the great satin.
So number one, he's not that smart, or he can't spell. I'm leading towards the fact that he's not that intelligent.
Yeah.
But we talked about him getting into some strange ideologies. I mean, shit, he's talking about the PLO, acting like, this is something that you might hear from a terrorist, right?
It sounds like it.
Death to the great Satan. Well, who's the great Satan in this scenario? United States.
United States, yeah.
So, of course, he had his AK-47 that he bought back in Sandy, Oregon. And he's got the Taurus pistol, the 9mm. He had attached a bayonet to the AK-47.
I think it's strange. Not strange, but I think, again, here he is, his hatred for America because and his stock of his gun, right? He's got freedom that he etched in. He's got, or carved in. He's got the word victory. But then he has Hezbollah, that he carved into the stock. So, again, terrorist or whatever that you want to call it, but it's
almost Gibbs like he picked a bunch of organizations that hated the United States and adorned his clothing and, carved him into his gun. And again, we're going to get into this. Why does he hate the United States? And why does he have a hatred of individuals that immigrated from Southeast Asia? We're going to talk about it more.
So he's got all this gear on, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's got his weapons, his car's burning.
He's Rambo'd up.
Yeah. So I'm just picturing him with his car behind him and big flames and, like you said, Rambo'd up, and he's ready to go.
He is. The car is bursts into flames. It's on an adjacent street. So he walks from the car towards the school, and specifically towards the school playground. And there's hundreds of kids outside at recess, and they're out there being kids. They're playing, they're having fun. I mean, you remember elementary school recess. That was the best.
Oh, I loved it, man.
That was when you got to hang out with your friends and play kickball or tag or whatever. That was the best part of the day back
out
then.
with a girl behind the bleachers.
If you were Mike Gibson. But I can't stress it enough. When you picture this scene, it's an elementary school playground, hundreds and hundreds, maybe 400 kids, it was estimated, were outside at this point in time. Patrick Purdy takes up a position and he starts firing on the playground into these kids with the AK-47. Now, the thing about the AK-47, we haven't talked about this. It is a bigger bullet caliber than an M16. It's a bigger. You and I talk about 5.56.
Right.
This is a 7.62.
Okay.
It is a bigger caliber bullet. So he opens fire, and ultimately he's going to fire this gun 105 times, at least. That's what the official report will end up saying, 105. There are some reports that have said, they thought it was as many as 150, but the official report is 105. The guy only reloaded one time. Now, that doesn't sound possible. And when I first saw that, okay, I thought, no, there's no way. You can't shoot 105 times and only reload once, because a normal AK-47 clip holds 30, I believe.
It does.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Like, I know an AR-15 clip holds 30, and I'm pretty sure the AK is the same way. So I thought that's not feasible. But then you come to find out that Patrick Purdy had bought a drum magazine for the AK-47. It held 75 bullets.
Yeah, massive.
75 bullets of a rifle cartridge. It is massive. So that's where you get to the 105, right? He emptied out this 75 round drum magazine. Then he put a 30 round clip and he emptied that. That adds up to 105. But think about 105 bullets. This thing only lasted 2 to 3 minutes. It doesn't take long at all to pull the trigger 105 times.
No.
You can do it very fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that would have been 2 to 3 minutes of absolute terror, not only for the kids, but the teachers. Now, when it was over, Patrick Purdy could hear police sirens. They were getting closer. And being the chicken shit that he was,
right,
he pulled out that Taurus 9mm handgun and shot himself in the head. Right there on the playground, fell down, crumpled on the asphalt.
Sure.
But Gibbs, the damage was done. 5 children were killed, 1 teacher, and over 30 other students were wounded.
It's absolutely terrible, but it could have been so much worse.
I agree with you.
If he was a good aim.
I'm surprised, almost surprised, I hate to say it that way, but to have 105 shots ring out in a crowded playground like that only 5 children were killed. And it's horrible.
It's terrible.
Terrible that those 5 were killed. But I agree with you. It could have been so much worse.
It could have been.
The 5 children killed were Sokim An, Ram Chun, Oam Lim, Rathanan Or, and Tai Tran. And all 5 of these children, 3 of them were 6 years old. 1 was 8 and 1 was 9. We're talking about very, very young children here.
Right.
And it's the same with the children that were wounded. All of them, because that's who was out, at recess at that time, they were all between the ages of 6 and 9 years old.
Just little babies, man.
Now, the majority of the children were of Cambodian or Vietnamese descent.
Okay.
That were wounded. 9 were Caucasian, 1 Hispanic, and 1 student was Native American. That's the makeup of the kids that were injured. All 5 of the kids that were killed came, I believe, from either, or their parents came from either Cambodia or Vietnam. And you think about why they came. They're looking for a better life. These families are.
American dream.
For their children. Think of the places that they're leaving. Vietnam, Cambodia, places that have been, in constant conflict for a number of years. Imagine the carnage and the death that these families saw over in those countries. Now they get to the United States and they think, this is it. This is where we're going to raise our kids. They're going to prosper. They're going to get a good education. We don't have to worry about all this violence. And then their kids are killed in a mass school shooting.
Yeah, they didn't get away from anything.
It's horrible. So I mentioned that 1 teacher was injured, and it was 2nd grade teacher Janet Ging. She was on recess duty that day, along with 1 other teacher, but it was Janet who was injured. And like I said, the 2 of them were watching over about 400 children out there having fun on the playground. And she would be interviewed later. She survived. She said, everything happened so fast. She heard the shots. She saw the asphalt on the playground start to kick up, right? As shots were fired into it, she saw the asphalt just kind of rise up into the air. And she kind of followed that and she could see the shooter, right? She saw a black gun. She saw red sparks coming out of it. She said kids were running, screaming, diving into the sandbox. Others ran towards the school. She was just screaming at the kids to get down, to take cover. And eventually she turned to run as well. And she was hit in the leg with a bullet. And in interviews, she described the feeling, Gibbs, as if her leg was a balloon that had been filled too full.
Wow. With
too much air until it ultimately popped.
Wow.
That's the way she described being hit with this, 7.62 round in the leg. But here's an interview with Janet.
I looked around and I saw a guy standing out by those 6th grade portables. I didn't see his face. It seems like he had sunglasses on, but he was in a stance like you see soldiers, the type of military stance with a gun, policeman stance with a gun right in front of him. And it was just total popping. I could see rocks flying. I felt the shot in my leg, and then I went down. And I could see partly around me, and I could see kids laying, and the other kids had run into the building. But I was laying there with my back to him, and I could still hear him going off, and I thought, he's going to shoot me anytime.
But it's always amazing to hear from the people that were actually involved. Because she was there. She experienced the panic, the fear, and the fear that she had for the kids. And it wasn't just her, right? There was other teachers. They weren't outside, but they were watching in horror from their classrooms. There was one story, Gibbs, about a teacher that had a classroom of hearing impaired students. And she talked about how she had to sign to them, about what was going on and, to get under their desks. And she said she remembered looking out the window and seeing Janet Ging on the ground with a hole in her leg. What she said, Gibbs, was the size of a grapefruit.
Wow. Well, that's type of caliber.
And I just can't overestimate this, the impact on this incident to so many people there that day. And even years down the road, right? We're talking nightmares, fear of public places. People have talked about how some of the teachers, how it ended their careers because they couldn't step foot in a school ever again.
No, I'm sure the anxiety,
the fear, it just wouldn't let them do it. And divorce. Many of the teachers talked about how they were so traumatized that ultimately their marriages just fell apart.
Yeah, taking that home every night, and if you weren't there, weren't involved, you'd be like, okay.
Eventually you're going to have to get over this type of, maybe.
And all you're doing is curled up, laying on bed all the time, depressed.
Depends on how supportive your spouse or significant other is.
Right.
But we're talking about the people that lived.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we talked about the 5 innocent kids that lost their lives. We talked about, obviously we can't name everyone that was wounded, but you have a lot of collateral damage in a situation like this. And some of these things, they may not show up, right, until many years down the road that ultimately devastate people's lives. Some of this anxiety, PTSD, some of these things that you experience as a kid, it may not show up in the worst way until 20 years down the road or something.
Yeah, one of those 9-year-olds, 6 years old could have found a way to block it out at that time, and then it resurfaces as
they got older.
Yeah, there's something that traumatizes them in life again, and it comes out, and then they remember, and.
And you talked about it earlier on. My wife's a teacher. She teaches 4th grade. And so I'm blown away by the heroism that, these teachers showed. And obviously we'll talk about it when we talk about some of the other school shootings as well. It's amazing what some of these teachers did. And in this case and in some of the other ones.
It was at recess time, so most of us were not in our rooms. The children were on the yard. I happened to go to the office to call a parent. And as I was leaving the office, people started running into the office and saying that there was a shooter, or there was shooting on the yard. And they were locking the office down, and I actually had to push somebody aside from the doorway to get out of the office, to run across the yard to get back to my classroom. No, you can't go. No, you can't go. We don't know how many people are out there with guns. And I said, but my kids are out there. So, and to be honest, I don't even know who that was holding me. I pushed that person aside and went out the door, looked, because there is an open yard there, and then went through the building.
And you know what? If you were inside an office, you would probably think it was multiple shooters. When you hear that many rounds, the first clip, 75 rounds go off within a minute. You're thinking, man, there's got to be 3, 4, 5 shooters out there
to shoot that many,
that fast.
But think about what she said. They're saying, no, don't go out there. It's too dangerous. And she says, I don't give a shit. Those are my kids.
Right. And
she said, I pushed somebody down to get through that door to try to get to my kids. This is a teacher. This is not a trained Navy SEAL. And that it just gets me, man. Yeah. That is good. Heroism. All right, Gibby, let's take another quick break to talk about BetterHelp. If there's something out there that is interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals, BetterHelp Online Counseling is there for you. They offer licensed professional counselors who are specialized in issues like depression, anxiety, trauma, and so much more. This interaction is done in a safe and private online environment, and anything you share is confidential. So you can get the help you need at your own time and at your own pace. Best of all, it's a truly affordable option. And TCAT listeners can get 10% off your first month using our discount code TCAT at betterhelp.com/TCAT. So why not get started today? Go to betterhelp.com/TCAT. All you have to do is fill out a questionnaire. This helps them assess your needs, and it also helps them match you with the best possible counselor. Again, that's betterhelp.com/TCAT and use our promo code TCAT. Don't let allergy season slow you down. Get common allergy meds for as little as $15 with GoodRx. So you and your family, pets included, can stop allergy symptoms before they start. GoodRx is free and easy to use. Just search for your prescription on the website or the app, compare prices, and get a free coupon to show your pharmacist. Save at over 70,000 local pharmacies nationwide, including Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Publix, Kroger, and many more. Check GoodRx before every trip to the pharmacy to save up to 80% on both brand and generic medications. And did you know GoodRx rewards you for saving money too? Join GoodRx Rewards today and earn points every time you use a coupon. Remember, GoodRx is not insurance, but works whether you have insurance or not. And it could be your insurance copay price. I've been using GoodRx for years, and I can't tell you how many times I have saved money even with my insurance. Stop allergies before they start and save big on allergy medications this season with GoodRx. Go to goodrx.com/TCAT. That's goodrx.com/TCATT. So after the shooting is over, when authorities start investigating, eventually they find Purdy's motel room. And inside this room, Gibbs, they find hundreds and hundreds of little toy soldiers, little green army men.
Yeah. And the tanks and the jeeps that go along with
everything.
It. Yeah.
It's like he's mapping some things out.
Right.
He also might have just been playing with them, but there was some indication that he was using them possibly to map the shooting out.
Right.
The more we learn about Patrick Edward Purdy, the more grotesque it gets. Police say for the past 3 weeks, Purdy stayed in this Stockton motel off Highway 99. Inside this room, police say they found ammunition and something very strange.
That there had to be 100 little plastic army men, a couple of jeeps and a tank that were spread out through the entire room, up on top of the drapes, in the shower, one in the freezer, and it has drawn on it some pictures and written in black ink at the top, V for victory, and at the bottom, F for freedom.
Now, I don't know why you put one in the freezer or in the shower, but again, I got to get into Purdy's mind.
Yeah.
Because I think by this point in time, obviously, to do something like this, to shoot up a schoolyard full of children, there's no making sense of that. You can spend the rest of your life. You're not going to make sense of this man. So they did an autopsy, and the autopsy came back. They didn't find drugs. They didn't find any evidence of, tumors like on his brain or anything that they thought would have caused him to act irrationally. And you can find it. You can find this autopsy. It's out there. And you can see the hand-drawn picture that the coroner made of Patrick Purdy. And it's labeled on his, I believe it was his right temple. It's labeled 1 1/4 inch gaping hole. And there's a little shaded area where he shot himself. And then there's another picture of the other side, not a picture, a drawing,
right,
of the other side of his face where they're showing you the exit wound. And it's labeled 1 1/2 inch by 5 3/4 inch. And that's where the exit wound was. It also states in the autopsy that he was wearing orange earplugs.
From normal shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even just construction. They didn't have to be specifically for shooting, but that's premeditated. Obviously, he knew what he was getting ready to do.
Oh, sure.
He thought, I better have these earplugs in. So the big question that everyone is asking, right, trying to make sense of this, why would Patrick Purdy gun down a schoolyard full of children? And you have the Stockton police captain. He comes out and says, he just hated everyone. But the state's attorney general's office, they did a big investigation after this shooting. And they concluded that the shooting was racially motivated. We hinted about that, a couple times during the episode. In the report they released, they said Patrick Purdy compensated for his own feelings of powerlessness and inadequacy by shifting blame to others and by rationalizing that he was unsuccessful only because of unfair favoritism to others who were receiving government support while he was not. That's a big statement.
It's a huge statement.
And it really encapsulates this whole thing. So we talked about the fact that he had a hard time sticking with a job. Couldn't maybe get the type of job that he thought he should have. At a lot of times in his life, he was living in Stockton, California, an area with a high concentration of people that had immigrated from Southeast Asia. He is probably seeing these people succeed through hard work ethic. He's not succeeding. So what does he think? He thinks that the U.S. government is giving these people everything, and that's why they're succeeding. I really think that's what a lot of this comes down to. And that's what the state attorney general's office, their investigation concluded as well. Now, they did say that he acted alone. That was one of the things that they had to figure out. And they also said, hey, this wasn't an impulse thing, right? This was premeditated murder. He carefully planned this out over the course of at least a month. And to them, the choice of victims was not random. The attorney general came out and said, Purdy attacked Southeast Asian immigrants out of a festering sense of racial resentment and hatred. Now, they found out through their investigation that he hated a lot of different groups, but especially any group whose ethnicity was different than his own. And he apparently especially despised individuals of Southeast Asian descent. There's just no way around it. There's too much evidence. They gathered it.
Yeah, it was writing on the wall.
Yeah. And they uncovered some very specific examples that backed this up. In 1987, we talked about Purdy taking welding classes at a college, and they found out that he complained to a lot of people at the college about the number of specifically Southeast Asian students at that college.
So he just didn't understand the demographics of the community he lived in.
Right. So that's why I wanted to make special note of Stockton.
Right.
And the percentage of people living in Stockton that were from Southeast Asia. Apparently he wasn't smart enough to realize that, if 1/6 of the population of Stockton is made up of a certain group or ethnicity,
right,
well, then the local college in Stockton is most likely going to have a similar proportion.
Yeah, it's going to be proportionate. The schools, the workplace, everything.
I just think he wasn't smart enough to figure that out. So sometime in early 1988, at one of his various jobs, he said to some coworkers that he didn't like competing against Southeast Asians for jobs. Right? He couldn't stick with a job, so he was all the time looking for a job. He also said that Vietnamese and communists would overrun the United States. And investigators found coworkers that said, he had started to badmouth the U.S. government for what he called the U.S. giving jobs and money to the Vietnamese.
So he just, ignorant, really.
Yeah, he thought everybody was getting a free ride, and here he's struggling.
He's afraid to work.
But couldn't figure out the fact that, these folks that came over from Vietnam, came over from Cambodia, probably had a work ethic that was much, much better than his, and were succeeding based on their hard work. Meanwhile, he's going from job to job and can't figure out why he's not the CEO of some major company. Just a few weeks before the attack, Purdy's in a bar in Stockton talking to other patrons of the bar, again, about the U.S. government giving
on his soapbox.
Yeah, on his soapbox. The U.S. government's giving free stuff, money, jobs to these people that come over. But these folks from that bar said that he said something very ominous that night. As he was leaving, he talked about what his AK-47 could do. And he told the people in the bar, "You're going to read about me in the papers."
Yeah.
He knew. He had been planning this, right? This was 2 weeks before. He'd been planning this thing for at least a month. He knew what he was going to do. On multiple occasions in the weeks leading up to the attack, he was seen staking out schools. He was caught by a janitor in a school at one time. In one instance, he was seen near the playground of the Cleveland school that he would later attack. At one point, he was stalking one of the local high schools that at night served as a Cambodian community center, I guess, where people could take classes at night.
So trying to figure out his target?
Yeah.
Or targets.
Yeah, trying to figure out what he's going to do. I mean, he knows what he's going to do, but maybe he hadn't narrowed it down to a single target, or maybe he thought, like you said, he could pull off more than one target. Even on the day of the attack, as he's getting into his car to drive to the school, he's talking to some guy in the parking lot, and his last known words were racially charged. You know, he told this guy at the motel that it was operated by Hindus. And his last words were apparently, this is what this guy said, the damn Hindus and boat people own everything. This guy was a racist.
Of course he was.
There's no doubt about it. So you had that question, right? Why would this guy shoot innocent children? But the other question that you had, and this is one that comes up, right, in every school shooting, how did this guy, Purdy, an alcoholic who had numerous arrests, had a long rap sheet of criminal offenses, walk into this gun shop in Sandy, Oregon, and buy an AK-47?
Yeah, I don't know how the alcoholic plays into it because, I mean, unless he was in there drunk, I mean, they would never know he's an alcoholic. There's not a system that registers you as an alcoholic. I mean, you can have things on your record like DWI, DUI, things like that. But, you know, an alcoholic and a good alcoholic, you wouldn't even know they're drunk anyway. So I don't know how that would come into play. But I think you asked the question, you know, when you have a criminal record like he did, how did that not get picked up within that 15-day period?
Well, keep in mind, there was no 15-day period for buying a rifle.
Oh, okay.
That was only for handgun.
That was just for the handgun.
Even back then, you could walk into a store and buy a rifle same day. But the answer is pretty easy. Anyone could walk into a store, buy a semi-automatic rifle, as long as you filled out the correct paperwork. And I don't think Gibbs, and I think this is the key factor, I just don't think he had a felony on his record.
Well, if he didn't have a felony, then...
Remember all those charges we talked about, it seemed like every one of them got knocked down underneath that felony mark.
Well, if you don't have a felony, then you're in the clear.
Also, I think back then, they just asked the question if you had a felony, and you could mark no.
And I think that's so stupid.
Yeah,
you know?
This was way before like you and I have purchased guns. You know what's involved in the background check.
Right.
You're filling out paperwork, but it's also going to the FBI. It's not
Absolutely.
like the honor system of just writing down if you've had, you know, felony
you
or
ever been a
domestic
criminal?
abuse.
No, not me. No, sir.
But I don't think that this was before the type of background checks that, you know, exist today. But as it does today, right? This shooting sparked both sides of the gun debate into action. You had those people calling for stricter gun control, and you had those people opposed to it. We have that today.
We will always have that.
It's never going to end.
In America, we will always have that.
It's never going to end. But what did come out of this was the Roberti Roos Assault Weapons Control Act of 1989. Now, this was specific to California, and it made certain brands and certain models of semi-automatic firearms illegal, those that were classified as assault weapons. And then 10 years later, in 94, they amended it to ban magazines that could hold more than 10 rounds. But again, this is a California thing.
Right.
There was a federal ban on assault weapons passed in 94, but it expired in 2004. And again, I don't want to get into what an assault weapon is. And, you know, that is almost a debate in and of itself. There are a lot of people that despise the term assault weapon. But I do want to talk about, as we wrap this up, Gibbs, one interesting story I ran across, and it was about a man named Rob Young. Rob Young was 6 years old. In 1989, he was at the Cleveland Elementary School that day, and he was one of the 30-plus kids that was wounded.
Really?
He later became a police officer and a gun owner. And there's a lot of articles and even videos about Rob Young. He's been pretty outspoken against many of the gun ban measures that have been proposed over the years. And a lot of people might think that's strange, right? This is a man who, as a kid, was wounded by an AK-47, what a lot of people, deem to be an assault weapon. And I think what's interesting about it is it's kind of put him at odds with many of the other students, and especially, the teachers that were there that day. Many of them are, obviously very opposed to guns and in favor of the different type of gun control that has been proposed over the years. But he's on the other side of it, as a police officer. And in one of the articles, he talks about it, how, guns have saved lives. And I just found it very interesting, the dynamic of his life, having lived through it.
Through that, yeah.
Becoming a police officer. And, you and I, Gibbs, we believe everybody has the right to take whatever stance they want on any issue. I just thought it was very interesting to read about him specifically, being there. Not just being there, but being one of the wounded.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was a good story. It's a really good story.
But that is it for the case of Patrick Purdy. Cleveland Elementary school shooting, Stockton massacre. I mean, again, it's got a lot of names, and I'm sure people in California are very familiar with this.
Right.
I don't know if the rest of the country is. This is not known like a Columbine or, some of the other ones that have been more recent. I didn't know much about this one before I started researching it. Gibbs, we got some voicemails.
Let's hear 'em.
Want to check those out?
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Daisy calling from London, England. I just wanted to say a massive thank you for your podcast. I listen to them all day, every day at work. It keeps me sane. I work in finance, so just constantly have them on repeat. I just wanted to say thanks, guys, and stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
I think it's great to hear the voice, and I really like the voicemail, and I work in finance myself, so I can appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Let me break this down. So actually, at first, I didn't think that was too bad. Then I felt like it morphed to Australian.
Okay.
And then I think you got, again, you kind of go like to the South, like a Southern United States.
Yeah.
I've never seen accents morph.
I don't know what you're talking about. I just really don't know.
That's a good one. While you're trying, I know you're still trying to do the same one. It just kind of slides off into different ones.
Just goes in a different direction.
But she said she's in finance and she needs something to get through the day. You and I are both in finance.
Yeah.
So we can
understand.
Commiserate with that.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. My name is Sarah. I'm from Vancouver, Washington. I never listened to a podcast before, but a couple months ago I found your podcast, and to be honest, nothing ever compares to True Crime All the Time. I've tried listening to other ones, but it's just not Mike and Gibby. And I just appreciate everything you guys do, and I love this podcast. I'm now just getting into the True Crime Unsolved, so I just wanted to say thanks, and keep your own time ticking. Bye.
And nothing compares to us. It's like that song.
You know what? I will say this.
To you.
There are a lot of very good true crime podcasts. There really are.
There really is.
So, but we're very happy if you like ours.
We love it.
Thank you we love to hear that.
Vancouver.
Hey guys, it's Cassidy calling from Athens, Greece. I'm actually a Canadian citizen, but I've been here working on a fishing boat for about a year and a half. And I got into your podcast last year when I was spending a lot of time alone on the boat. And it made me start locking my cabin door at night, even though I was there by myself and had security. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you guys I love the podcast. Both of you are hilarious and can't choose a favorite. All right, love you guys, and yeah, bye.
Athens, Greece. So that's so close to the Italy. You know, she's just around the corner.
So you're gonna do Italian?
Yeah, because I can't remember what the Greece sounds like. So I do that, and I say, "How amazing!" She's working on a fishing boat out on the beautiful water, catching these beautiful fish all day long.
So we fly over to Greece. But she's a Canadian citizen.
She's Canadian.
And she's on a fishing boat.
Yes.
Which I would think you would want to lock your cabin door anyway.
I don't know. You're out there on the open water.
That's what I'm saying. You're out on the open water.
What you worried about, mate?
I'm worried about the other fishermen.
Oh, that's true. Or pirates. Pirates are out there. Get some pirates.
Hi, guys. It's Carolyn from Dallas. And I just wanted to tell you that I listen to your podcast all the time. I listen to a lot of true crime, and you're my favorite. Always will be. And I look forward to every episode, every week. I'm a Nashville native, Nashville, Tennessee. And we had a crime there that happened when I was growing up, the Marsha Trimble case. And if you look on the internet, you'll see that. That's a real interesting story. And then the Perry March, or Janet March, M-A-R-C-H case, where Perry killed his wife, and they've never found her to this day. But he's in prison. And the last one is Dennis Paul Reed, R-E-I-D. He was the Nashville fast food killer. In fact, my daughter worked with him at a restaurant, and after he was arrested, we, of course, were mortified. And they interviewed my daughter on the news, and that's when I became a true crime addict. And I'm always listening, watching, and so forth. But I just love your podcast. I think you guys are great. Y'all work so well together, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right. Love that voicemail.
You're from the South, y'all.
Well,
the Paula Dean kind of voice, like, you know.
You and I love Nashville.
Well, we do love Nashville, and we love Dallas. Wasn't she from Dallas now?
Yeah. Actually, two of my favorite cities, Nashville and Dallas.
Definitely love Nashville for sure.
So we'll definitely check into all three of those, but she's really got me hooked on this Nashville fast food killer.
Yeah.
I got to check into that.
We got some Nashville friends that grew up around that time. We ought to reach out and see what they say about it.
Well, what time was it? How do you know what time it was?
Because it had fast food.
You crack me up. You don't even know what time period we're talking about, but they grew up around that time.
Yeah, you know, they're no.
Hey guys, this is Paul Dean in Paulding County, Georgia. Ooh, Fred and Rosemary West. As a father of a daughter, I almost had to turn this podcast off several times. And I don't have a weak stomach, but because of how you reported on it, really made it not as terrible. But thank you for that. Thank you for always making it as lighthearted as possible, but still showing respect to everyone. Anyways, keep up the good work and keep your own time ticking. By the way, British people say garage, not garage. Anyways, bye.
Garage, I told you that from the beginning. I don't know why you not listen to me. It's the garage.
Garage? I like garage.
Go out to the garage and get the...
I swear I think I've heard British people say garage.
Garage.
But I could be totally wrong.
Well, unless it's people like me. Garage.
I'll go with Paul. How crazy is it that his name was Paul Dean?
Yeah.
You just talked about Paula Dean.
I know.
And had no idea. Because you never hear the voicemails ahead of time.
Nope.
I never let you hear them.
It's a surprise.
Hey guys, just wanted to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and I will now do my best turkey impersonation for you. And I wanted to remind everybody or have you give an announcement, True Crime Podcast, Chicago, July 13th. Got my ticket. Looking forward to it. Love you guys. Hope you have good holidays coming up too. Do the best. Bye.
So a couple things. Shows you how far behind we are on voicemails.
Sure.
And the other and then the next thing is we will be at the festival in Chicago. I'm looking forward to it.
Are we? When is it?
July something or other.
Did you give me those dates
yet?
yet?
Just said it. No. I told you we were going.
Well, you probably need to give me the dates.
It's so far out.
Well, I might want to book my hotel.
Oh, that's true.
I'm not spooning with you again. It ain't happening.
That's why I don't tell you ahead of time.
Yeah, so I probably need to know.
It forces you into a spooning scenario.
What hotel so I can get my room now?
But I do want to hear that turkey impersonation in person.
Sure.
In Chicago.
Well, she's a gobbler.
So that's it, Gibbs. No mailbag this week.
Nothing in the mail?
Nothing in the mail.
What would you like to have in the mail?
I never turned down beef jerky.
So send some beef jerky to Mike. We've been getting
some pretty good beef jerky.
Yeah.
One of the ones we got last week was an IPA beef jerky.
Really?
So it was infused with an IPA.
Oh, that's good stuff.
It was good. All right, that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Inspired by the hit Wondery podcast Against the Odds comes the gripping guidebook, How to Survive Against the Odds, Tales and Tips for Animal Attacks and Natural Disasters. This might just be the most important book you'll ever read. Go inside life or death situations where everyday people survived nature's most extreme scenarios, and learn how you can too. In these tales, you'll hear about the grit, willpower, and know-how needed to endure shipwrecks, alligator attacks, earthquakes, and more. You'll learn from experts, including top doctors, about what happens to your body and mind in life-threatening situations. Plus, important tips on what to do, and equally important, what not to do when faced with a situation that is truly against the odds. Go to survivalguidebook.com to pre-order How to Survive Against the Odds today and get the perfect gift in time for graduation and Father's Day.